Thank you very much for waiting. Now we would like to begin our International Disaster Reduction Forum 2023, commemorating DRA's 20th anniversary. It is titled Passing On Disaster Culture to the Future and Preparing for Catastrophic Disasters, what the Disaster Reduction Alliance, DRA, aims for toward the future 100 years from now. I'm Naomi Shimizu, Hyogo Prefecture's PR specialist. I'll be your MC today. First of all, on behalf of the organizers, we'll hear from Mr. Makoto Iokibe, who is the chairperson of DRA and Hyogo Earthquake Memorial 21st Research Institute. So, Mr. Iokibe, could you go ahead?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us despite your busy schedule, and also such a cold wave is approaching. So last year, the forum was held online because of the COVID. But this year, we'll be able to hold this both online and also face-to-face. And there are many participants through the online as well, and I appreciate your attendance. And the characteristics of this DRA this year is that we have the members from the Turkish-Japanese Foundation from Turkey, such as the chairperson, the Sayan, and the vice chairperson, the Ozdamaro. So in Japanese, it's Tonichi, and it's May. You may think that it's Saturday and Sunday, but it means Turkish and Japan. And I have engaged in such a deep relationship with Turkey for many years, even though geographically it is very distant. However, there are a lot of common points between Japan and Turkey, and also it is on the border between the Asia and Europe. And Japan has its unique the culture and the policy, and so does Turkey. And Kemal Pasha, before war, there was the modernization, and we have made a lot of the active discussion at the society. So I feel so grateful to invite all the members from Turkey, and there was the great Hansin Awaji earthquake took place, and there are so many disasters, the major disasters, one after another around the world, and there are many museums made, and we also created the think tank to exchange the opinions. There are not many other such the prefecture, but the Kobe and Hyogo taking the leadership to doing that. And the government in those days, they did try to make the revolution of the based upon the existing system. And however, they tried to disrupt such system and structure in order to make it something innovative. And creating the think tank, it was quite challenging. But the 4 years after the COVID great Hyogo and Awaji great earthquake, and in 1999 there was also the earthquake in Turkey. So we have dispatched the members from Hyogo Prefecture for support, and it was broadcasted in Japan. And that broadcasting was one of the opportunity or momentum to make some social changes in Japan. So Turkey and Japan, both countries facing a lot of major disasters. but they greatly appreciate the support from Japan. And from Japan's side, because we provided the support and we were able to gain the support, domestic support as well. And it was a very good trigger for us to further expand our activities. And 4 years later, after the Hanji Awaji Great Earthquake, there was a Turkey earthquake. And 4 years after that, we decided to make this new momentum. So Turkey and Japan Foundation, we are collaborating together in 2013, which means that 10 years later. So through 20 years, and now we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of our relationship and think tank for the disaster risk reduction. And it was quite challenging, but at the same time, it was quite meaningful. So not just the museum to exhibit something, it is the place to have the researchers, and which cost a lot of money. After the earthquake, the reconstruction itself was quite challenging. However, Hyogo Prefecture made a great effort, and all the executive members and the government made it unexceptionally. It was because of the cooperation between the prefecture and the national government. Another important thing is the Disaster Risk Reduction Research Center. Not only that institute, but also the other external stakeholders like JICA and also the UN, such as the OCHA. Those executive members from the international organizations also get involved, and WHO is also one of them. So this is the organization to research the global environment and also the safety and security of the people. So over 20 or close to 30 organizations are involved. So it's not just a think tank for the risk reduction, disaster risk reduction, but also more overall think tank. And Oshima-san, who passed away last year, was also the very powerful member and representative of such the international organization. And thanks for all those important members working together, which was a great support for us. And now, under the COVID-19, and there was various changes, but the branch office of the WHO located here. And I think that this is quite the important and significant foundation for us to secure the safety and security of the people. That is a main part of the disaster risk reduction. And also the Hyogo International Framework. In the past, we tend to focus, or international attention tend to focus on the support for the developing countries, but it's not only enough. We have to make this disaster risk reduction as the mainstream. And that was Hyogo Prefecture and Japan who experienced such a great earthquake. And we have led or taken the initiative for the disaster risk reduction in Japan. And Mr. Kawada, the executive director of the DRA, is going to make the keynote speech today. And he's one of the leading person in Japan in terms of the disaster risk reduction. And we will share with you the various ideas based upon the reflection on the past and also the ambition for the future. So the Japanese disease risk reduction, as well as the international, the Mr. Hayashi, and also from Turkey, we have Mr. Emin Özdemir, the vice chairman of the Turkey and Japanese Foundation, and also Mr. Kobayashi from the Telnet. Who have led the activity for the disaster risk reduction in Hyogo, and also Mr. Kimura, who is the Director General of the Kansai JICA Kansai Center. So I feel so honored to have so many important speakers, and also many people are connecting through the online. And for the next 100 year. And I hope that this is going to be a very meaningful opportunity to exchange the opinions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will hear from the governor of Hyogo, Mr. Motohiko Saito. From him, we have received a video message. So please take a look at this. I'm Motohiko Saito, the governor of Hyogo. As we open the Forum on International Disaster Reduction, Alliance Forum 2023, I would like to give a few words as one of the organizers. Disaster Reduction Alliance, DRA, was established in 2002, aiming to link specialized institutions in HAT Kobe and become an international hub of relevant activities. Disaster Reduction and Human Renovation Institution, or DRI, is at its center and has commemorated its 20th anniversary this year. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to those who supported the institution. This year marks the 28th anniversary since the Hanshin Awashi Great Earthquake, which happened on January 17, 1995. Here in Hyogo Prefecture, there are more people who have not experienced the quake. There is a concern that the memory may fade away. In order to prepare for the next disaster and build a safe and secure society, our mission is to pass down our experience and lessons to future generations, both domestic and abroad. In particular, the idea of building a better society than before a disaster through reconstruction has become a creative reconstruction model. It became the basis of reconstruction policy after East Japan and Kumamoto earthquakes. In addition, this philosophy is positioned as Build Back Better by the United Nations Sendai Disaster Reduction Framework. It is a universal vision of reconstruction from disaster that's valued across the globe. When the Osaka Kansai World Expo starts in 2025, it will be the 30th year since Hanshin Awashi earthquake. We share the vision with Miyagi, Iwate, and Fukushima in Tohoku, as well as Kumamoto and Niigata, and hold joint forums and tours in areas built back better. This way, we will spread the spirit of creative reconstruction. Also, for Ukrainians praying for peace and security, we will support them in our own ways based on the idea of creative reconstruction. Today, we have Mr. Ojuturk, Consul General from Turkey, with us. Staff from Hyogo Turkey Friendship Fund has come here all the way from Turkey. We have built this friendship of disaster reduction over 20 years, since the Turkey's Northwest earthquake in 1999. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to those doing their best in high school exchange and disaster reduction programs. Today's theme is passing down the disaster culture and preparing for catastrophic disasters. Based on DRA's 20 years of experience, I hope to see a meaningful discussion on the next 100 years. Lastly, but not least, I hope that today's forum will be a success for everyone. This concludes my greeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to have a word from Mr. Takeo Murakami, the Counselor of the Cabinet Office, Government of Japan. Mr. Murakami, please. Good afternoon. I am Murakami, the Counselor of the Cabinet Office, and Mr. Yokebe and Mr. Nijat Barasalan, and the Director of the Turkey-Japan Foundation, and Governor Saito, and all the members. I'd like to make some word. And last year was another year of the disasters around the world, and also in Pakistan there was the record-breaking flood from June to October, and it lasted many months and affected tens of millions of people. And also the other extreme weather disasters such as flood, heat waves, and drought have occurred. And in Japan last year there was the earthquake of the Fukushima Prefecture, March, and heavy rain in July and August, and also river flooding and landslide in the typhoon 14 and 15 in September. And I'd like to pray for the repose of their souls of those who lost their lives in the disaster, and extend our sympathy to those affected. And I extend my heartiest congratulations on the International Disaster Reduction Alliance Forum being held splendidly this year. And in particular, this year's the forum commemorates the 20th anniversary of the Disaster Reduction Alliance established in October 2012. And the theme of this forum is passing on disaster culture to the future and preparing for the catastrophic disaster. And it's been 28 years since the Great Hanshin-Awaji earthquake, and 12 years since the East Japan earthquake. And through those two major earthquakes, and the Japanese people's awareness of disasters reduction has increased. However, recently it tended to reach the plateau. According to the Japanese Cabinet Office poll, the percentage of the respondents who answered that they secure house furniture increased to about 40% immediately after the Great Earthquake, East Great Earthquake, but it recently leveled off. And under such circumstances, this year, 2023 marks the 100th anniversary of the Great Kanto earthquake, which is said to be the worst disaster in Japan. So taking this opportunity, I feel that it's truly timely theme to renew our commitment to passing on the disaster culture and to enhance their preparedness for the catastrophic disaster. And this year also marks the interim year of the implementation of the Sendai Framework of Disaster Reduction, which was adopted at the Third United Nations World Conference. And the Sendai Framework for the Disaster Reduction is a Japan-originated international standard that succeeded the principles of the Hyogo Framework for Action adopted in Kobe in 2005. So through the forum, I hope that there will be a discussion on what the international community should work on in the second half of the Sendai Framework for the Disaster Reduction for the next 100 years. And in closing, I'd like to thank the members of the Hyogo Prefectural Government, DRA, for their effort in preparing for today's forum. And also wish you success in today's forum, as well as continued success in all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, from Turkish Japanese Foundation, we will hear from Mr. Nejat Bora-Sayan. So, Mr. Sayan, could you go ahead? Hello, everyone. I am Nejat Bora-Sayan. I am the chairperson of Turkish Japanese Foundation. I'm really delighted to be here. My Japanese is not that good, but I made this speech in Japanese. I will try my best. I got a scholarship from the Education Ministry from 1989 to 1991. For 1.5 years, I was in Osaka University and majoring in oral care studies in Osaka University. After my research is over, I came back to Tokyo. But in order to raise the awareness of different countries, I have made efforts. I also would like to make further efforts now as well. From 1994 to 2000, Ankara University's faculty appointed me as a lead, and I served that role for 10 years. I got an award from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In my life, that was a very significant event, and I feel it very honored. I am really honored to have received that. In Turkey, there are programs that I participated in, and I received a lot of benefits. And people from Hyogo and Kobe and Japan are quite well understood by Turkish people. Today, we are here because our foundation would like to say thank you. Because you supported in a lot of projects, which we'd like to explain today. When we think about natural disasters, we need seminars. Up to now, Japan's embassy, JICA, and Turkish Bureau authority has cooperated, and there are many events held. We share the pains because both of us are full of disasters in the country. In 1999, which is 4 years after Hanshin Awashi earthquake, in that year, on the 17th of August, in Turkey, we had an earthquake, and they helped us heal our wounds. And there was a donation from Japan's side. In 1999, December 12th, between Hyogo and our foundation, there was an agreement made. And our foundation and friendship was demonstrated. And based on that, we would like to make sure that there are 8 years education support for school children. In 2000, we started and continued until 2014, this project. And then more than 5,000 people got scholarship. They got Turkish scholarships. They had an opportunity to go to Japan. This project was finished, and in 2013, Hyogo Prefecture and our foundation started to agree on an agreement. From 2016, we started a number of projects, and students and teachers have received programs and panel discussions, workshops, and project introduction activities. And many other programs were held. In this project, the programs conducted will be explained by Mr. Emin Ozdamar later on. And thanks to that support, we got a lot of education on disaster reduction. And there is more cooperation between Japan and Turkey. And youth in those countries started to develop friendship. Hyogo Prefecture has supported us, and people in Turkey has started to improve their lives. For educational purposes, we have received your support. We learned about your culture. We had opportunities to meet Japanese people, visit many other cities, and build friendship between the two countries. It is now important and possible to help other people after receiving this support, and Turkish people are very appreciative of the support given from Japan. A lot of support required a lot of tasks to be done, and the welcoming spirit from both countries meant that projects were made possible to be continued. I appreciate all the people in Hyogo Prefecture and people who have helped out of the most hardship. And I would like to say appreciation to the governor of Hyogo. We are really feeling honored to be able to help you in this forum. This is the success of everyone. From the beginning, you have been with us. We have got the support from Paris office and Hyogo prefectural staff. They have made this friendship and other programs possible. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'd like to have keynote speech. The chairperson of the Executive Committee of the International DRA Forum and the Executive Director of DRI, Mr. Yoshiaki Kawada, is going to talk about the Disaster Reduction and Human Renovation Institution and 20-year history and new endeavors. And as for the speaker's profile, it is available with the handout. So due to the time constraint, I appreciate if you refer to those profiles as well by yourself. Good afternoon. I am Kawada. Thank you very much for attending this DRA Forum 2023 and also the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the DRA. So our DRA activity and DRI activity, I think that this forum is like a comprehensive reflection of our past activity and also the opportunity and also share with you our visions for the next step. So first, I'd like to start with the relationship between the evaluation of the past and endeavors toward the future. As you know, it's been the third year since the COVID-19 pandemic started. And this COVID-19, the virus variant, is said to generate every 50 seconds or so. So the evolution of living thing is sustained by mutation, according to the Darwin's theory. And the reason for the mutation is because the living thing would deteriorate and vanish unless they continue mutations. So that means that the constant changes and mutation is required as the living thing. And the same can be said for the human beings. So those changes could be or highly likely to occur through new endeavors, not simply by continuing the past conduct. So why do we need to evaluate the past? DRA Forum and the DRI. In the past 20 years, we need to recognize that things have not always proceeded smoothly. So we have to think about the reason why it didn't go smoothly. And we always think about what kind of changes needed to go through or keep going. And in the past 20 years, I think that the renovation was not sufficient. So first step is that we have to accurately aware of that fact. So the reform is something about acknowledging the negative factors. Otherwise, you'll not be able to make a success. So you have to have courage to face the past, inconvenient truths. But it requires the courage to try something new. Without the courage, in other words, you will not be able to do something new. So DRI and the DRA Forum, we had set the 6 targets. And in the past 18 years, we have conducted the self-assessment and think about the reason why things didn't go well. So this way we could qualify the reason for the failure. It didn't mean that we kept assessment 20 years in consecutive. And I myself think that I'm the only one who can make the overall assessment of the past 20 years, because that I have been responsible for this institute for the past 20 years. At first, I was intended to do it 3 years. The Mr. Kaihara, the governor of the Hyogo at that time, appointed me. And I used to be the professor of the Kyoto University. And I accepted this position as the executive director of this institute from the perspective that maybe we could do something to support as the Kyoto University. However, as the top of this institution, we have to always be subjective and objective, as well as subjective. And the reason why we could do this both is because of the lesson learned through our experience of the disasters. And we have to disseminate those lessons. And the reason why the building of the DRI is made of glass is because that we have the very strong intention to disseminate those messages and lessons learned. So for these 6 targets, we haven't made enough outcome, is especially because we are still not being able to disseminate this information outside of Japan. And this means that to create the environment where the disseminated lessons are put into practice around the world. And there are so many major disasters happening around the world. And in Pakistan, the 33 million, the casualty. And COP27, the Pakistan cannot overcome the recovery on their own, and they need an international fund to fully recover. And quantitative content has not been finalized yet in terms of the support, but what is already determined is that the international support is definitely necessary for them to recover. And this kind of message we have to keep disseminating. So SDGs started from 2015, and it is going almost simultaneously as the Sendai framework. So the Sendai, the action framework is very basis for our SDGs activity. And it's the IDNDR, the natural disaster reduction, our company and the Morocco made a proposal, and it was adopted. But in 1990s, there were the major disasters around the world. The Bangladesh in 1991, and the 140,000 people died. And also the Pinatubo eruption, Mount Pinatubo eruption in Philippines occurred in 1991. And what was found was that if major disaster takes place in developing country, it would wipe out the long effort for economic development. That means that once they encounter the disaster and that they go poor, accordingly, the economic development needs to come after disaster reduction measures. So first, we have to make the investment for the disaster risk reduction. And the Millennium Development Goal 2001, the Hyogo Framework for Action 2005, and the Sendai Framework for the Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015, and SDGs in 2015. And it shows the Millennium Development Goals on the left and SDGs Development Goals on the right. And it was selected by the expert of the United States, United Nations. And SDGs has 70 goals and 169 targets. And many countries agreed with those targets. So you probably see this chart everywhere. And I also have a batch of the SDGs. It's like a symbol of SDGs. The 7 colors is quite popular in Japan today. However, the first target to eliminate the poverty and the sustainable development, the first goal is no poverty. And some people may think that it's nothing to do with me in this country, but it's not true, because that the Sendai's the framework for disaster risk reduction, the original reason is to eliminate the disaster. However, the 1/3 of the member of these the SDGs actually suffering from the natural disaster, and it's difficult to agree with the target, the elimination of the disaster as the first goal. Therefore, no poverty is probably more common for any member country. However, unfortunately, it is not the case in Japan. That many people in Japan tend to think that Japan is the developed country and the poverty is irrelevant. But the truth is not. But when it comes to the disaster risk reduction, it is not really outstanding in SDGs. It is because the first goal is not reflected here, but the true meaning of the SDG is to reduce the disaster risk. If you think that you have to do everything included in those goals, and people may lose the relevancy and passion, and there is such a risk. Another point that I would like to mention is that the word development, when it's translated into Japanese, the hatten, and it might cause some misunderstanding. That's why it was translated into kaihatsu in Japanese. However, there is some confusion, and last year the GDP per capita, the million population, and Japan was 27 ranking last year. So we have plotted all the top 27 countries. And you see that there is a need to be economically affluent to reduce the risk of the disaster, because they will be able to have a good infrastructure for the hospital, etc. However, when you plot the top 26 countries and nominal GDP per capita, the bigger it is, the infection rate and death rate is bigger. So that means that it's not right only if the country becomes economically rich. So it tells something, the importance of the need of the enhancement of the civilized disaster reduction capabilities. And from Turkey to Germany, there is an immigrant, like 6 million of the immigrant moving out to Germany. And there is the difference of the religion. In Japan, we have the wedding ceremony in church, and we go to the shrine to celebrate 3-year or 5-year of the children's birthday. And it is like all the mixture and the fusion of all different types of the religious habit in Japan. And it's not the standard of the world. And in Japan, and during the Edo period, there is the long isolation period from the rest of the world. And tatami, straw mat, was developed during the Edo period. And in the developing 7 countries, Japan is the only country where we take off shoes at the entrance. And Mr. Shinpei Goto, for the preparation for the war with Russia and the liquid chloride, Japan government tried to accumulate that as a stock, but there was no longer need. And Shinpei Goto was the doctor and took the doctorship in Nagoya University and studied abroad in Germany, and came back to Japan and became the counselor of the MHLW. And his task was acknowledged and becomes the top of the Tokyo branch. So he suggested to put the chlorine into tapping water. And they started in Tokyo and Osaka, and the infection of the tuberculosis decreased dramatically. So 10 milligram per liter, the tapped water contains chlorine, according to the standard, Japan standard. And because of that, and when you gargle and wash hand and cook and do laundry and take a bath and toilet, and all of this can prevent the infection. Not many people is aware of that. So the growth of the country is not only about the economical affluence, and the COVID-19 pandemic taught us about this. So for the sustainable development, for the developing country, it is about the scientific development to make the country rich. On the other hand, for the developed country like Japan, it's not enough. So we need a more like a cultural advancement, and those two things have to be combined. So this is something that we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. So the science and culture has to be combined together.
So this disaster reduction capability is based on the civilization and culture. As you can see in the triangle, civilization is the basis, and on top of that, there is a culture. And we need to develop the civilization and at the same time develop our cultural capability. That's what I'm saying. At DRA and DRI, we want to make the use of those lessons in our future activities. So, for one thing, I would like to talk about the 100 years plan for disaster reduction picture book. When I was in Kyoto University, I got the PhD, and it's been 47 years since then. And I've made a lot of disaster reduction efforts since then. And I noticed that the most important thing is the disaster reduction education, especially even after the high schools. It needs to penetrate into our lifestyles. And that is education we are lacking. That's what I have realized. So, this is a 100 years plan for picture book of disaster reduction. Starting from this year, let's spend 100 years to do this. That's what I thought. So, this says that ensure quality education, not only from the elementary to high school education, they are not the standard education. People need to know that. Why? Because when we learn about our society, there are a lot of questions that we don't have any answers for. In schools, you learn about the answers to questions. After you graduate and start working in a society, you don't know about the questions that doesn't have any answers. They struggle because of that. But as a everyday wisdom, we need to start to think about those answers to the questions. such education needs to be practical in principle. We need to find the answers, or at least we need to strive for finding the answer. Not only just knowledge, but also wisdom needs to be inculcated. But you cannot do this alone. It's almost impossible. For example, just like a picture book here, a parent may be able to read a picture book to children. That's the basics. And it does not cost much. So, even though you are in a poor country, you can devise many ways to pass down the knowledge from parent to child. That's what I thought. And I have written a lot of things here, but as mentioned already, if you talk about the people with handicap or disability, how do we make sure that they are exposed to the information or education? We have a lot of tools in our world, but that is not enough. If you are with disability, in order for us to educate them, what should we do? It's education. Is it done in schools? No. The quickest way is to do it at home. We need the home education. That's what I have realized. So, this is a disaster reduction or Bosai 100 years picture book centrally done by DRA, and we have started taking actions. In 100 years, we're not sure if this is successful or not. But throughout the world, is there any country that is creating a plan for 100 years ahead? As far as I know, there is no country. In Netherlands, a Delta plan in 1953, more than 1,500 people died due to a natural disaster. And towards the year 2000, they created an embankment that can withstand the natural disaster, which happens once in 10,000 years. But that's a plan for 47 years ahead. But even though we were saying that high tide is going to happen, Netherlands is 100% okay. We have 109 first-class rivers, but we have a lot of linear rain band, but those are happening once in 1,000 years. And our country will be put to danger if we are preparing this way. But there, Netherlands is looking at 10,000 years ahead. Of course, locally, there are some collapse in the embankment, but they spent 47 years building the banks. So let's spend 100 years to publish 500 picture books of disaster reduction so that people who are not involved in the disaster reduction can get to know about the vulnerability of natural disasters. That's what I decided to do. We wanted to create a culture of disaster reduction, and that's what I wanted to execute. And this is a steady step. It's a slow step, and it does not continue easily. So sometimes you may think, well, as Mr. Kobayashi will present, we need to have living lessons telling forums that was held by him. And in 2025, we need to create a global event to activate the people. And for the next 45 years, we can make efforts one by one. And when people start to forget about the natural disasters, we can have another big event. That's how we are going to spend another 100 years. There are many features here. As I said before, small children can get to know about disaster reduction. We can also narrow the gap of poverty. That's very important. So that's one thing I wanted to do. And as Mr. Hayashi will talk about catastrophic disaster, let me touch upon that as well. No poverty means no disaster. When we think about a catastrophic disaster, then Japan will be destroyed. This means that, as the head of JICA Kansai Center will report, it means that Japan cannot contribute internationally for DRR. ODA will not be possible. So even though we have a catastrophic disaster, we need to be resilient. We need to build Japan in that way. For disaster reduction, we can actually negatively contribute to international society. When we have a Ukraine war, and when there is a catastrophic disaster in Japan, we cannot take care of other nations, which needs to be avoided, of course. In that sense, we need to minimize the damage of catastrophic disasters, which is a very important promise from Japan to the international community. That's what I thought. So, when we think about no poverty here, it's also about no disaster. That's something we'd like you to understand. We are at the front runner. And if we have a catastrophic disaster, and if we don't run our nation, then we'll be 100% poor. During this pandemic, no one has become richer. There are a lot of people who did bad things, but basically, after this pandemic, everybody got poorer. We need to avoid this kind of situation again. As detailed explanations will be given later, Nankai Trough earthquake and other inland metropolitan earthquake will definitely happen. We can avoid wars, but natural disasters cannot, unfortunately, because we don't know when it's going to happen. When it happens, it'll be catastrophic. It's an everlasting lesson, I believe. So, for us, how can we avoid all of that? We have started academic research about that. We need to minimize the extreme damage, and we need to make the best use of the phase transition so that we can have a standard risk management methods to avoid having extremely high amount of damage. For the past 20 years, this is the outcome of DRI's research. It's not about doing all the things to minimize the damage. As you can see, in 1995, out of 5,500 people who died, majority of them were collapsed by the houses, not by the fires. In 1923, 105,000 people died, and 90% of them died due to fire. So when you have an earthquake, extinguish the fire. That's a slogan for the disaster reduction day. We have always said that. 500 people died by fire, but 10 times as much as that were killed by the collapsed houses. So we need to reinforce the construction standard criteria that's driven by the Japanese government. 90% of the houses now in Japan are resilient enough to withstand earthquakes. When there is a major disaster, we need to avoid a big damage. We need to find the phase transition point. That's what I have found out. We need to apply that to future disasters. So when the Nankai Trough earthquake happens, we need to evacuate, and there will be more complex disasters due to evacuation. Last April, the Japanese government said that 7.7 million people need evacuation help, and more than 1 minute of shake will happen, and your furniture may go down, may fall down, because it's not prepared against such a long earthquake. If it's an inland earthquake lasting 10 seconds, that's fine, but if it's more than 1 minute, everything will collapse. And if you go out of your house, and can you really evacuate to the evacuation shelter? That's a serious problem. And in case of inland earthquake, there will be a lot of power outages in vast areas. As you know, in this winter, TEPCO and Tokai Energy Company had only 4% left in the allowance of energy supply. When there is an inland earthquake now, there will be more than 1 month of power outage. And then this means that all the metropolitan functions will be lost. This will mean that we need to understand how dreadful the damage will be when a catastrophic disaster happens. So we talked about this disaster civilization and culture. We need to combine these two in a good manner. Mr. Hayashi will mention this later. There have been a long-standing initiative to be explained by him regarding the disaster culture. We have a law that cannot counter everything. We have created a news resilience forum so that we are now proposing a new emergency clause in Japanese constitution. Otherwise, we cannot protect the people's human rights. If the constitution is not revised, our laws will be affected as well. So everything is connected. DRA and DRI have been here for 20 years now. So from now, what are we going to do? We need to be looking more internationally and work on projects and programs. We appreciate your understanding and cooperation. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kawata, thank you. Next, we would like to have special lectures. So we have two speakers to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the DRA establishment. And the first is the Vice Chairman from the Turkey-Japan Foundation, Mr. Emin Özdamaru, will talk about the DRR program in Turkey through the Hyogo-Turkey Friendship Fund. Mr. Özdamaru, please.
Distinguished President, distinguished Director, distinguished Consul General of Turkey to Nagoya, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very much pleased to share our project and experience with you. At first, on behalf of Turkish-Japanese Foundation, I would like to, I must acknowledge and express our sincere appreciation to Hyogo Prefecture government, as well as to residents of Hyogo for their donation after Great Marmara earthquake that hit Turkey in 1999. With this contribution, we established, as our chairman, Professor Sayan mentioned, Hyogo-Turkey Friendship Fund jointly established. Thanks to this fund, we were and are able to implement disaster risk reduction project. Let me share a piece of our activities with you. What we did during the last 6-7 years. Why? Okay. With the donations of the Hyogo Prefecture government and residents of Hyogo Prefecture after 1999 earthquake, the fund was established in the 99, that jointly the Turkish-Japanese Foundation and Hyogo Prefecture government. In fact, I'm going to focus on the activities right after the first, second fund agreement after the first one, signed by the governor of the Hyogo, Mr. Ido, and the former chairman of the foundation on October the 31st in 2013. We have been managing this fund with Hyogo Prefecture, jointly, supporting many the project in Turkey with the relevant organization. I have to mention that the most of our project that we received the experience of the trainees of the JICA, who mainly received the training in Hyogo. Means that we are, in fact, a kind of having the role of the moderation, transferring the experience of Hyogo to Turkey throughout the ex-participants, both the JICA and our Hyogo overseas trainings program. If we categorize our disaster risk reduction project, I may list up as you can see the screen, the training programs for students, then teachers. Especially like to focus on the needs of the training for the people with special needs, mainly intellectual disabilities. We call the inclusive disaster risk reduction for mainly not the person, but their support personnel and family members, including the teachers. Disaster education and training material development, and then their distribution. Disaster project contents, the Bosai Quotient. Recently we have started. This is the kind of the infusion from Hyogo to Turkey. Participating in the Congress workshop panel to share our experiences. This is the disaster risk of Turkey. You see we have many fault lines, and then most of the areas, the earthquake 1 degree areas. In the past, always, I mean, every 2-3 years, we have been unfortunately receiving the big earthquake. Recently, in the 2020, happened the earthquake in Izmir, Aegean coast. In fact, the epicenter was not in Turkey, but in Aegean Sea, they closed to Greece. Unfortunately, more than 100 people passed away. For the first time in Turkey, one people dead, I mean, because of tsunami in our history. These are this is the map of the hazard map prepared by the Disaster and Emergency Management Authority of Turkey. The white dots, okay, these are white dots. The program that we invited the students and teachers from the different locations. These are you see the under the heavy earthquake risk, just in the cities beneath the active fault lines. First is that the disaster risk reduction training invitation program. Till now, avoiding the pandemic period between 2016 and 19, 6 times we implemented the disaster risk reduction invitation training program. First, from sorry. Okay, okay, back. One is there in the close to Iran border. 2011, there was a big earthquake. Also, one Japanese passed away who came to Turkey voluntarily to share, distribute the goods for the victims, earthquake victims. Between Çankırı and Van and Çankırı, Düzce and Erzincan. Düzce is the place that hit by the second earthquake in 1999. And Erzincan, also the historically always shaking place. Many people passed away, more than the 50,000 in its history. With this program, the different location, different culture, the people came together, the Turkish-Japanese Foundation. We introduced them to Japanese culture. While enjoying, the playing, we step by step, we try to introduce what they should do during and before, during and after a disaster. This is the photo from the disaster training center. In fact, this is the kind of the experience sharing. The center established in Turkey, based on the model of the Hitoto Bosai Mirai Center. Very similar to your center, partly different. You see the senior volunteers of JICA in the left. Okay, I can't hear the lady. First aid, what the earthquake is, then the behavior of the building, firefighting, the rail corridor, the shaking table, typhoon, and all types of disaster. The students are learning, and then they are transferring their experience to their classmates on their return. During one of the training program, the parliamentary members also visit the Bursa Bosaikan. Then students also were very much encouraged. After these programs, the second one, like the Kairu Caravan, we call the Disaster Friendship Caravan. The instructors from Bursa and Ankara, we all together went to the schools of the students in the eastern part of Turkey. In 2 times, in the one group, Muş, Bingöl, Elazığ, the other in the Van and Erciş. Two caravan moved to the area together with the trained students. They will be the instructors of the assistants of their expert. Then we call that a kind of training between the students. What we did, the shadow theater, like a kamishibai, different than that. Training station for the students, fall lines, the building behaviors and others, all done by the students with support of the instructors. That was the big influences in the schools. You can see the views. This is called the internationally shadow theater, like the kamishibai. While they are enjoying, they learn a bit about the disaster risk reduction, but it needs the continuation of such program in due time. We like to continue. The other program like to introduce you the Disability Inclusive Disaster Risk Reduction as the pilot project in Cappadocia area, the touristical spot of Turkey, with the cooperation of an NGO. We did very nice program for the parents, teachers, and support person. Then spreading these activities, this is the view from the kind of the training. Again, we invited them to Bursa Disaster Learning Center, the Bursa Bosaikan. Always using this, very much appreciate the sharing experience from Hyogo to Turkey through the JICA project. Then, after the accumulated information, we hold a workshop with international participation on intellectual disability and inclusive disaster risk reduction. Kindly, the Japanese expert Japanese expert also came from, I think, Hyogo, the Kansai area. Together with the representatives from the Hyogo Prefectural government. Professor Tatsuki, they shared their experiences. That was a great help for us. And our expert also shared their experiences. In fact, every 2 years, we plan to implement such a workshop in different parts of Turkey. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we have to resume these activities, but soon, maybe the next year, the second one will be conducted. Then, if it's realized, I would like to invite some of the prominent experts from Japan working on the intellectual disability and disaster risk reduction. And they also continued the seminar about the inclusive disaster risk reduction activities and painting contents on the friendship between Turkey and Japan. JICA's top officials also visited, and ambassadors always with us. This is the view from the Turkish-Japanese Foundation. We always encourage the people with intellectual disabilities and their teachers to understand the needs of disaster risk reduction. And various training program for teacher we conducted, especially we are recently focusing on the teacher in specializing on the special education, and especially the intellectual disability, the responsible teacher. We made a kind of agreement with the Minister of National Education of Turkey. Several agreement two agreement we did, and one with the Bursa governorship. We have been continuing our activities. As a piece of activities, let me tell you that the 5 pilot provinces, the Bolu, Düzce, Bursa, Nevşehir, all of them, also in Istanbul, all of them in the earthquake risky zone. Then teacher understanding the needs of the preparation before and during the disaster. Then they are trying to share their experiences with their colleagues as well as their students, but not as expected level because of the level of their intellectual disability. If it's moderate, they can memorize some activities based on the practices. With the training with Bursa provinces, more than 250 teachers will be trained. Then later on, these teachers will continue sharing experience with the parents of their teachers with support of our expert. That's on the way to the preparations. Before summer, all activities will be conducted as we expect. Some of the JICA trainees, a kind of pre-orientation, our expert provided training before departure to Turkey. These are the teachers, the photo from the Turkish-Japanese Foundation. It's a project of the JICA's project of the school-based disaster education. From different view, not only the disaster education, from our perspective, we provide with activities disaster psychology as well as the special attention to the teacher with special students of the special needs. And in Turkey, different than Japan, recently I learned that the students, the pre-service teacher, compulsorily receive the disaster risk reduction courses. I learned it from the Professor Oda from Miyagi University of Education. That Japan applying the training, education of disaster risk reduction education for pre-service teacher, but not applied in Turkey. For the first time, the Middle East Technical cooperation with Middle East Technical University, pre-service teacher, we provide for the pre-service teacher we provided training. That was the compulsory the course. That the university applied in cooperation with our experts. This is one of our projects. Some of them we invited to Bursa Disaster Learning Center, and also our expert and I myself share our experiences with them. They applied some activities in the school using our materials. Then volunteer teacher group also received the training. They focus on the climate change and disaster preparedness. The climate change is the hot issues in Turkey recently. Both we are combining climate change and disaster preparedness. This is the photos from school-based disaster education teachers received that. training. Also, we developed some materials mentioned. One is the video clip, other is the disaster preparedness game. We say the quiz carpet, the left side. The other is the puppet. Especially this is the students in kindergarten. This is one of the very famous, the shadow theater, disaster training with shadow theater. We always carry this, and then this is that was constructed with support of our fund. This young guy now is the university students, learning, focusing on these issues, both in Japanese and English version we provided. I think some of you might watch that video. Disaster puzzle, that is one of our material created by our expert group. During the pandemic, the students, may be a bit different from Japan, they had to leave, have to stay their home. The age under 18, more than 5-6 months, they had to live in their houses. To make them normalize and then to make them socialize, we created the online disaster risk reduction training. This for the cultural exchange, for the kind of peer learning, in fact, practices. Sharing the disaster information, disaster education between the countries. The pandemic announced in Turkey in the March, the first week of the March. Then we started our first online training between Hokkaido and One in the first week of May. This is some of the from the culture and exchange part. For the first time, that was conducted in English. Then I'd like to emphasize that none of the students good at English. They try to learn English using the Google Translator, never use the PowerPoint. Most of them never use the PowerPoint, never use the Zoom. Then all together they learned, made a practice day and night. Then at the end, they really became very communicable with the others. This is some of from the one, it's our first program. Then first with Sapporo, May 5th, the other again from Sapporo to Turkey. Then students group from Sendai, Fukushima, Yamagata. That was very nice. Learned that our students learned that there is the club, student club. Club activities focusing on the disaster risk reduction. It's very new in Turkey. Then very much pleased to learn what they have been doing. These are some photos. Then moved to Kochi, Ogata High School, then Reikoku High School 2 times. Then at the end, Maiko High School. That is very nice for us because the first school that we learned providing with the disaster course, the disaster risk reduction course in Japan. Then first one, the 9 students from Hyogo and 10 from Van Erjish did in that exchange seminar. This is one of the view from that seminar, very small kind. The other is, there is also important that with Takajo High School, that is second one, as far as I know, in Japan, providing with the special course on disaster risk reduction. This is, in fact, a kind of commemoration of disasters of 2011. Both cities, the Miyagi and One, hit by the big earthquake, tsunami and earthquake in Miyagi and then earthquake in One, 2011. This is a very meaningful exchange seminar we did. Then moved to, again, with great support of Hyogo Prefecture government, Nishinomiya Imazu High School, That was very impressive one. These are the photos of the Nishinomiya Imazu High School students. Then again, Nishinomiya Imazu in the 13th one last year. In next the coming months, the March, there will be 2 online seminars. One will be with the Maiko High School. The other is Amagasaki Oda High School, with different schools from Turkey. We will continue those activities. Till now, the 13 programs, the exchange seminars, with it is peer learning, very much important. Then students exchanging information each other. We are very much encouraging them. Another our program is that during the summer schools for Japanese culture and disaster training. In 2018 and 19, we did 5-day programs each, totally about 100 students receive the 5 days training at the Turkish-Japanese Foundation on Japanese culture as well as disaster training. And also during the summer school, Japanese culture and disaster training, another visit of Princess Akiko Mikasa also visited us. We were very much honored with that visit together with our student. And these are the view. Last year, after pandemic, we again started the summer school last summer. 2 programs, totally 30 students were trained again. Then at the end, this is our very new program. In fact, a kind of the really experience sharing of Hyogo. For the first time in Turkey, we implemented Bosai Koushen. In fact, we consider the first program for the students, but due to the pandemic, the students were not in the school, therefore started from the teachers. From 21 provinces, 40 materials we received. These are the yellow dots. You can see the provinces, then how many project received. This is some photos from awarding ceremony or exhibition. The second one for the students, this time close to 100 project from 28 provinces we received, and 14 were awarded. Different categories: primary, secondary, high school, and special education. Always we put the special education category. Then second one, these are the distribution in the country. And then these are the material. There's the good things that always with the deputy ministers, Minister of National Education, always with us, visited our exhibition as well. That was appeared in the Mainichi Shimbun in Japan, both Kansai and Kanto version. We were very much glad to know that. After that, the 3 representative students invited for the second Global Youth Bosai Summit. This is the kind of preparation for Banpaku. Then our ambassador of Turkey to Japan, and then Japanese ambassador to Turkey, also expressed their they encourage us with participation. We also, exhibited our students' project in the international Congress, Disaster and Resiliency Congress. That was very much appreciated by the participants. The second disaster education material development contest we also did this year. There's a more project than the first year we received. From 27 provinces, 45 material we got, the distribution in the country. Always the Paris office of Hyogo prefectural government kindly came and presented the deliver the speech on behalf of Hyogo Prefectural Government. Other activities, hosting global academic network, solidarity campaign for Kumamoto earthquake, for the earthquake victim, Hyogo overseas training. There are many others. Then also PR material, we are introducing the Hyogo Prefecture's activities, then their support, always mentioning that we are very much appreciate again for the great support of Hyogo Prefecture government. You can get the photos and videos from our Facebook and YouTube channels. If I have time, I don't know if remain, like to show you 5 minutes, very short video, but the long version is available in the foyer. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Mr. Uzamaru, thank you very much. So next we'd like to have the lecture from the Mr. Hayashi from the National Research Institute for the Earth Science and Disaster Resilience. The theme is the preparation for catastrophic disaster. Thank you for introduction. My name is Hayashi, and I'd like to talk about the preparation for catastrophic disaster. So this is what current status of Japan in the first half of the 21st century, and around the 2035 there will be the Nankai Trough earthquake, and unfortunately very close to that earthquake, that will be the Tokyo Metropolitan Near-Field earthquake is likely to occur. And before there were the frequent inland earthquake, mainly in the West Japan, including Yamasaki. And internationally, Etrofu, Kunasiri, area, coastal area, there will be some earthquake likely to occur. Like Nemuro or Kushiro would be the vicinity of those earthquakes, but there is no preparedness for the Japanese government for that earthquake. And we cannot predict those earthquakes accurately. However, we have to be ready for those disasters, and it is going to take long term for recovery and reconstruction. So I mentioned earlier the Nankai Trough earthquake and the Tokyo Metropolitan, and it would require it will be the 30 trillion or more damages, and 2.2 the Nankai Trough, and 95 will be the Metropolitan. And the biggest is the East Japan, and 70 trillion. So compared to that, it is way bigger, or almost incommensurable. So considering the population of Japan per capita from child to the elderly, it would have the 3 million yen debt. So this is how the damage is going to spread from Suruga to Miyazaki for Nankai Trough, which is the plate facing the Pacific Ocean. And of course, the damage is going to concentrate in the populated area. And this is the 2003 estimate, which is the 8.7 magnitude, which is the largest scale in the history. So if it takes place at the same time, it'll be the huge damage. As you can see, there is some damages in Kanto area. So in East Japan Great Earthquake, the magnitude was 9.0. And nobody can deny the possibility of this scale of the or magnitude of the earthquake. So we did the simulation, and it showed that in Kanto area, the damage is widely spread. Around the Hamanako Lake is red. That means that it would hit the industrial foundation, and also Nagoya and Osaka and Kansai region will be affected. As you can see, the red area. So would this catastrophic disaster really happen? The truth is that Japan is heading for a bad situation because that more than 100 municipality there was the damage simultaneously, and various the laws and regulations to support was enacted, and it was the quite a vast range. And for that, the comprehensive adjustment is needed, but we're not ready for that. So in 2019, after the Great East Japan, the Typhoon 19, it hits the 390 municipality prefectures having damaged simultaneously. So disaster is taking place more widely. And Nankai Trough, according to the assessment of Japan, and it'll be the seismic part of 6 or higher, and it'll be the 909 municipality will be the area, designated area for support required. So how to deal with this? We have to think about it. That is about the center part of the slide. And I put the 2 boxes above and below. The above, it shows the extreme weather and climate change. As you know, the population is growing, and the urbanizations and the fossil fuel is being used vastly, and as a result of that, and there is the extreme weather such as flooding since 1970. It is rapidly increasing. So that might coincide with the some of the metropolitan near field earthquake or the Nankai Trough earthquake. And extreme weather or weather disaster could happen every year. So when it's combined with those major earthquake, and it would require much longer term recovery and reconstruction. Another thing we have to think about is that first, in the history, we are now in the depopulation phase. We had more than 2,000-year history of Japan, but this country decrease of population with a 2004 as peak year, and every year it decreases by 1 million. And it's like the entire Sendai prefecture disappear every year. So the population is decreasing because there is no childbirth, and the number of the childbirths keep decreasing. And on the other hand, the aging society keeps going. So under such circumstances, are we really able to manage the situation? Talking about this population, it is important to mention that the labor population especially would decrease, and it would affect the affluence of the country. And also there will be the energy issue or food self-sufficient issues. So are we able to survive under such harsh environment? So the first is, I said that 30 trillion yen damage, but there will be some others. Like the over 300,000 people would die, and also the the capital function might be paralyzed, and also the Tokaido Shinkansen and Tomei, the highway, will be affected, and the transportation will be damaged badly, and also Hamanako and the Mikawa Omi area, which is the important industrial foundation, will be damaged as well. And at the end of last year, it was said about the sovereign risk. So there is the risk of the increased sovereign risk, such as the long term of the interest rate and the government bonds. And also when there is the great demand for reconstruction, and there might be the shortage of workers. So this is based upon what happened in the past, and also what would happen in the future combined, and it is the scenario likely to occur. Nankai tribe, ever since 7th century, and it takes place almost every generation, and it hasn't happened in Japan yet, but there is the possibility that Japan, the country, may disappear. It's called a diaspora. Like the Jewish people or the overseas Chinese, the Japanese people may have to disperse around the world. Or Japan may have to be dependent on some other country or colonized by another country. And some people say that it's happening gradually or slowly, but it might be the case in the future for Japan. Or when we look at the Nankai Trough earthquake in the past, right after the earthquake, there was the change of the government. It happened actually in the past, like 1605 Keicho earthquake. And from Toyotomi and Tokugawa, there was a change of the government. And Edo, 1602, there was a change of the government. And also 1854, the Ansai earthquake. And there was the Ansai Edo earthquake took place in 1855. And also Tokugawa era destroyed. And there was the Showa era Nankai Trough earthquake. And that was when the Japan Empire changed to the next phase. And every time the change of the government, there was the counterbalancing force. So the earthquake can promote or trigger the change of the government. And in 1707, there was a Hoei earthquake. And before that, there was the Genroku earthquake in 1703. That was not the inland type. It was like the pre-Kanto Great Earthquake. And in 1707, there was a Hoei big earthquake. And then the eruption of Mount Fuji. So it happened in those 4-year period. So it was all Edo period. And after that, the Tokugawa era was destroyed, and the government a significant change of the power until the 15 shogun. So it seems to have a very strong relationship between the government and also the earthquake. And the Kanto, the big earthquake in 1923. There was the financial crisis. Financial crisis took place during this period. So you can say that the major earthquake could affect or something to do with the decline in the power of the nation. And talking about the decline of the nation, there was the Lisbon earthquake in 1755. And it was the street earthquake. And Portuguese was the powerful company next to Spain, but it was significantly hit by this huge earthquake. And you see this decline of the Portugal through the various historical remainings. But you see that the biggest city in the world was badly damaged.
So Lisbon earthquake may not be that relevant in order to answer the question. I would like to show this kind of data here. This is GDP per capita and its trend. This is before the Industrial Revolution. So economy was quite stabilized. Seen from now, it was just a subtle fluctuation. And after the revolution, the incline started to be rapid, and the Pacific War and WW2, and after that, GDP per capita started to climb up. This triangle shows the Lisbon earthquake. Before and after that, for 100 years each, GDP per capita can be compared, and we can say the following. We're now enlarging the scale to show the magic of statistics. Well, beforehand, it was basically going up. Although there was one failure, but basically the number is going up. And unfortunately, Lisbon earthquake was a trigger that Mr. Bombard did a lot of a reconstruction effort. He failed at the end, but after his failure, the economy started to fall. Seen from now, it was not that huge fluctuation, but for people at that time, their economy scale was halved, which must have been a huge impact. So for us going forward, even though nothing happens, we may have this subtle decline as a nation. So we've been talking about catastrophic disasters, and I'm scaring you today. When we look at ourselves now, how much time do we have left? We cannot minimize the damage expected to zero. Then, in order to mitigate the damage, we need to continue our efforts, but that's not enough, right? In addition to that, important social functions will have to be considered from the enhanced business continuity capability. And as a whole in the society, we need to have a quick reconstruction and recovery. These three elements can be all realized to make a resilience. And what is an enabler for that? I think resilient society is an enabler. We need to enhance the resilience of our society. That's the conclusion so far. So when we talk about resilience, the UN has already defined one way, and in 2009 they defined it first. In 2017, the definition was enlarged, and to this day, and in SDGs, they didn't talk about SDGs as a term, but the disaster reduction or elimination of disaster is very important. Resilience is a power to eliminate disaster. So we need to enhance our resilience in the society. Who has the resiliency? Well, each one of us do have a resilience. And many different people create organizations and communities. They also have resilience. Government and social systems also have resilience. Sometimes they are non-personal, but they also have resilience. So when we think about individuals, community, and government, or nation, we have resilience that are intertwined with each other. In the disaster reduction world, we have been talking about self-help, mutual help, and communal help since 1995. If you work alone, that's self-help. And mutual help and public help or communal help is about working with others or working with government. So from these mutual self-help and communal help are combined to make a resilience. I think that's another way to put it. So what is resilience? If you think about it here, this is the typical diagram that we'll see. It can be about individuals, it can be about organizations, country, or society, or international society. Usually we're at 100%. We're meeting the requirements as functions, but when there is a disaster, there is a damage and some of the functions are lost. This means that we need to start the recovery activities. It will take some time, but if it goes well, we can recover back to 100% again. If you're injured, you rehabilitate yourself, right? If you think about it, this triangle should be convincing to you. The issue here is the blue area in triangle. This is a lost function, or in other words, this is about vulnerability. How do we minimize this area? That is translated as resilience. There are two ways to do this. We minimize the damage, or quickly recover so we can stand up again. These are the ways to promote resilience. In case of catastrophic disasters, it says in its definition to resist, absorb, accommodate, adapt to, transform, and recover from the effects of a hazard. That's how the behavior of the catastrophic disaster is made. Resist and absorb mean that there is an external force, but the damage is not that high, or change is minor. When in Japan, we have high resilience against disaster prevention, so the damage should be small in this case. Next is about accommodate and recover. This is the same triangle as we saw. Although we do have some damages, everyone makes efforts to stand up again. After 1995, this may have happened. Creative reconstruction is actually on the right-hand side. It's about building back better than before the earthquake. Well, realistically, it is more like coming back to the stabilization phase, not as good as before the earthquake happened. So, either one of the three scenarios are to be presented. But seemingly they are different, but on the background of that is the identity that is still maintained, I believe, among these three cases. So how do we measure these three behaviors? It's about before something happens, while it's happening, and after it happened. We can measure the resilience reaction in each of these three phases, and we can compare them. What is defining this change? Well, hazard strength. Sorry, this is a technical term, but in your life, there may be some hazards that may disrupt your safety. For example, earthquakes, disasters, and climate disasters are included here. Resilience capability include communal help, mutual help, and self-help. We talked about natural disasters as hazards, but we also have accidents that could trigger hazards. The same goes with terrorists or terrorisms. We need to be prepared against all of that, which will be very important. 300 trillion yen of damage has never been experienced by us, but as I mentioned already, more than 100 or close to 400 municipalities applied for the Disaster Relief Act. This is what we have experienced. We can analyze the details here. And what kind of countermeasures should we take? We can think about all of that. So, natural disasters, tsunami, earthquakes are not the only ones we have to consider. In our lives, there are a lot of distractions. all of which could be considered as hazards. There is a seed of lesson in everything we see. Events could also be a hazard. Other than the schedule, it could also be a hazard, as some stakeholders think. In the World Expo in 2025, this may also bring us another important lesson. So resilience was mentioned. We talked about self-help, mutual help, public help, and communal help. If we think about it from a welfare point of view, these four are comprised of 5 components. What are the differences? Self-help is in twofold. Voluntary activities. Next is about purchase of market service as self-help. In welfare studies, there are many supports through which individuals can start to live by themselves. So self-help needs to be enhanced through the purchase of market service. And here, my point is rather this. We are depopulation experiencing. This is where we are. So mutual help may go down because we have less people. There will be less people around you that can help you. Self-help will also be difficult. People will be aged. And public help will be difficult because the revenue and tax to the government is going to decrease. So in order to enhance resilience, what is important? Well, I think market or service purchase is one. Another one is the mutual help based on systems. For example, insurance and mutual aid are some examples. After 1995, Kobe City has started this example really quickly. Based on some rules, they helped each other as a system. And this kind of system needs to be expanded more. Maybe these are the 2 only solutions to enhance our resilience. If we talk about the resilience model a little broader, well, when we think about resilience enhancement, mutual help based on systems and the purchase of market service are the 2 solutions I mentioned. But social challenges and social science may have evolved that will give us some more lessons. And we're in the Anthropocene time. That also creates some hazards which we could not think about before. So resilience are not universal. It can fluctuate. It can change from mid to long term. That's how we have to think about the resilience and its enhancement. If we have resilience between individuals, then the interactions between individuals can enhance the resilience. But governments can work to communities or to individuals, as we have already seen in the pandemic, is another case. What's changing things is actually the best practice sharing between individuals. That also can change the way a government or a nation should be, I hope. But it seems like we're not in that phase. We have not experienced that level of disaster. And if you have not experienced it, it's hard to imagine. In order to make it easier, what can we do? Well, Mr. Kawata mentioned that picture book, right? That's quite cost-effective. But from my perspective, in my institution, we can do it on a larger scale, if I can mention this way. So recently, digital twin is quite popular, so we'd like to make the best use of it. Real and digital worlds are integrated, and these 2 worlds have information that goes between, and they can change the reality before the reality changes us. So disaster response, DX. Well, everything comes with DX recently, but we can think about it. It can also change the way we work. And this cycle can also be changed. And I think that's what we need to do. In that sense, when we have a disaster, on a cyberspace, we think about that disaster through simulation and put it back to the reality. How does that sound like? We're now seriously thinking about that possibility. In order to organize all of that, we are thinking about high geographical information, 3D geographical information, and all the other positional information are tagged together. We're putting them into the virtual reality. People talk about data, IoT, when we start talking about this, but if you look at the bottom of this triangle here, this is not enough. We need your wisdom, we need your knowledge, because they can help you tag the time and space. In that sense, picture book is related to the wisdom part. I think that's what Mr. Kawata wants to go to finally. If we compute everything and summarize everything, we should be able to see the results through the use of OSSSR. That's Online Synthesis System for Sustainability and Resilience. This should be available online, and we can use that information for forecast, prevention, and disaster response. That's what we are trying to do for the next 15 years. We want to make our best efforts. Sorry, I'm running out of time, so that's it from my side. Thank you so much for your attention.
Mr. Hayashi, thank you.
Now, let's start the panel discussion titled Enhance International Disaster Reduction through Cultural Disaster Reduction Projects. Let me introduce the facilitator. From DRA, Executive Director, Mr. Kawata Yoshiaki. And we'll introduce the panelists now. From the right, Vice Chairman, Turkish-Japanese Foundation, Emin Ozdamar. Next, President of the National Research Institute of Earth Science and Disaster Resilience, Mr. Haruo Hayashi. Advisor, CoPlan Inc., Ikuo Kobayashi. Director General, Kansai Center, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA Kansai, Izuru Kimura. These are the panelists. Regarding the profile of each panelist, we'll skip them and due to the time constraints. Please refer to the program. So, Mr. Kawata, could you start facilitation? Yes. We had 3 speeches or presentations. We're now getting into a panel discussion. There is a person who hasn't spoken a word yet, so we want to make sure that they can speak for 15 minutes before having a short but a good panel discussion here. So today we'll talk about enhancing international disaster reduction through cultural disaster reduction projects. Rather than having too many viewpoints, we want to think from the viewpoint of DRI and our experience so that we can think about what we need to do for the future. And we would like to have a good agreement with every one of you here so that we can have a future perspective of activities at DRI.
I am Kobayashi. I'd like to explain why I am here because you may wonder why. So until last year, I was involved in the DRI. And also until last year, I worked for the Hyogo the University as the professor. And in 2002, when I was at the DRI and I started to get involved as the representative of the Telnet. So I'd like to explain about Telnet. This is the old brochure, but I'd like to explain what it is. It is the network for the telling live lessons. So across the country border, and I think it's very important to disseminate the story so that we'll be able to reduce the disaster victims. So it is the international network, and DRA commemorating 20th anniversary. And in 2004, the DRA Forum 2004 or 2005, I mentioned that it's very important to transfer the live lesson from disasters, because by doing that, and people will be able to reduce the number of the victims, and that was such a proposal. And in 2006, this Telnet was established to connect around the world with the Kobe as a core. So this is how the organization Telnet was established. And in 2006, there was the earthquake in Sumatra coastal area, and the area called Simuluto. The mayor visited Kobe, and they had a major disaster because of the tsunami. And the Simuru Island was close to the center of the earthquake, and there was a big tsunami. However, there is few victims. The reason is because there was the tsunami 100 years ago in that area, and they made a song that as soon as tsunami comes, and you have to escape right away. So that story was succeeded one after another. And in 2010, it was commemorating the 15th anniversary of the Hansei-Awaji earthquake, and we had a Telnet forum and discussed the meaning, significance, and methodologies of telling live lessons. There was a 3-day sessions in Kobe, and 10 years after that, which is the today, 3 years ago, in 2010. There was the forum from the January 24th to 26th in 2020, and there was the Telnet forum, and we have invited the Eric Carter and other chairmen, and we discussed what to be told, and also the power and the condition of telling story, and the way of telling story, and using picture book or singing song. There is various way to tell the live lessons, and the museum has a very big impact as well in terms of the telling live lessons. So what is important is that it's not about the what to tell, how to tell the story is probably more important, because it's not just a record, but it's a memory, and it could be more like a culture beyond the period. And I think it's very important to continue telling live lessons. And another point that was discussed was the communication and the grassroots communication is getting more and more powerful. And I think that is the very origin to create the flow of the telling live lesson. And 1999, right after the earthquake in Turkey, there was a 9/1 earthquake in Taiwan. When it happened, the know-how of the restoration of the city was disseminated from Kobe to Taiwan. And in 2004, there was the Great Niigata Chuetsu earthquake. And it took place almost in similar situations, natural situations, rather than directly under the metropolitan area. So probably the lesson learned from the Taiwan earthquake will be helpful for that. So that know-how was disseminated to the Niigata Chuetsu earthquake restoration. And then after that, there was the earthquake in China, Shenzhen in 2008, and it was also handed down the know-how for the restoration of this Great Hsinchu Wenchuan earthquake in China. So I think that this cultural communications was very important role in terms of telling the lessons. There was a paper dome in Takatori. You see the lower right picture, made in 1995. It was made after the church was dismantled, and when it's dismantled, and then it's taken to the Taiwan Taomin, and it was moved to this area in 2009 as a symbol of the reconstruction after the earthquake. And we also have the association with the New Orleans and Kobe, and since 2005. So we thought that simply discussing the disaster damage, it doesn't generate anything. So we decided to do some cultural exchange through jazz. So there is a slight difference between the earthquake and the water disaster. However, there are some common point, and we could have a good communication through the jazz. And also, we did various research regarding the disaster and the recovery. And through the forum, how to share the overall picture of the transferring the live lessons, and how to disseminate these lessons to the non-damaged or affected area or people. And this is part of our homepage, so please take a look if you have interest. And through this activity of the Telnet, there was a few things that I found out. And one thing is that what happened in the past, how we can transfer those live lessons through photographs, audiovisual material, and left behind items, music, and pictures or monuments. And also the people who tell the story make a very important role as well. Another learning is about the telling the live lessons tend to be considered as the vertical, which means that handing over the lessons from one generation to the other. But not only the vertical, but also the horizontal communications are very important. The horizontal communication means that the affected people and the other affected area people. And this is how we can continue the constructing the very close relationship. So not just telling live lessons, but also communicating and sharing is very important.
Thank you very much. So next, Mr. Kimura from JICA, could you go ahead? Yes, thank you so much. I'm from JICA Kansai Center. My name is Kimura. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much. So international cooperation is my area, and from that viewpoint, I would like to talk about my role in JICA. There are three things. One, it's about the overview of JICA. I'll be really brief. Number two is about Japan's experience and cooperation overseas regarding disaster reduction. Number three, today's theme is about the future of 100 years from now. What should we do? Those are the three things we'd like to talk about today. So, Japanese government is creating ODA, which is conducted by JICA. We have 15 locations in Japan, and JICA Kansai Center, where I am located, it's in Hatsukobe, and there are 4 areas that we are covering through different businesses. We are one part of the DRA, and I have been really blessed to know that it's been the 20th year, and I have been a good friend of Mr. Kawata, and I also would like to celebrate the 20th anniversary of DRI and DRA. This is JICA's mission and vision. Our mission is that we realize human security and quality growth. Vision is to lead the world with trust. From 2017, this vision has been used, and for the next 100 years, human security, quality growth, and leading the world with trust, these are the universal keywords. So that's why I wanted to mention that here. Reconstruction and disaster reduction are essential when we consider these 3 words. So this is about our overview. 139 countries and regions we have served. That's 2/3 of the world. Some of the countries and regions have already graduated from our JICA support. And on the left top, we have 96 overseas locations, almost half of the world's countries. They're focusing on the on-site support. And domestically, we have 15 offices. What are the menus we have as JICA? Technical assistance is one. There are a lot of Turkish examples, and this is one of the examples in the technical assistance. Infrastructure needs to be created as well through the grant and loan financial assistance. So we have the JICA Overseas Cooperation Team, including the Youth Overseas Cooperation Team. And the third one from the bottom is International Emergency Assistance. When there is an emergency abroad, we create an emergency team to go to the site as quickly as possible. So this is a scale that we're looking at. Exchanges between people is very important, and that's the cornerstone of our trust. Last year, we accepted 24,722 people from developing countries. They're basically governmental administrative officers. And from Japan, we have dispatched 4,017 people overseas. They are experts and youth JICA overseas cooperation teams. So in total, we have already accepted 700,000 people and dispatched over 250,000 people overseas. So those are the exchanges that are the cornerstone of the assistance between countries. 1.5 trillion yen was last year's scale. Basically, that's this amount is going to be paid back to the government later, but 1.5 trillion yen is our scale we're looking at. And as I mentioned, the human security and quality growth, what are they? Well, human security is all linked to disaster reduction. We have the right to live free from fear and deficiency. We need to live with dignity, and international society and government need to have the obligation to guarantee that. Ogata Sadako was the joint chairperson and who created this idea of human security. It's very famous. And we have been talking about resilience in relation to the quality growth. It's not only about quantitative growth. We need to be inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. So those are the areas that we need to include when we think about quality growth, when we support developing countries. So that's the overview of JICA. Let's go to the second part. Based on Japan's experience, what are the things that we're assisting to overseas countries? When we think about disaster or disaster reduction, what do you imagine? I think basically it's about different things depending on where you live. In Japan, we talk about typhoons and torrential rains, but I used to be in Manila where typhoons and flooding were frequent. In Iraq, drought and sandstorm were frequent. South Sudan and Kenya will have a lot of drought and landslide. So disasters come in various forms. As Mr. Kawata mentioned, 1/3 of the countries in the world have natural disasters. But in Japan, we have a variety of natural disasters. Of course, this is a painful experience for Japan, but this is a great lesson for other countries. Based on all of these, what we are trying to do and have tried to do in disaster prevention assistance have been the mainstreaming of disaster reduction. We have to include disaster reduction aspects in everything we do. There are 3 items here. The developing countries need to put a disaster reduction as priority. We need to include the disaster reduction as an aspect in the development policy plan. And we need to also expand the investment for disaster reduction. This is the Bangkok in Thailand. As you can see, Bangkok has a lot of flooding. We did the jack-up of the entrance. So when there is a flooding, we also created a guideline to where to jack it up. So 11 years ago, there was a flooding. Japanese companies were also damaged there. This subway was created in 2004. And 7 years later, the flooding happened and airports were closed. But this Blue Line subway did not have any water intrusion. They continued their business. Next example is from medical institutions. In the middle of Luzon Island in the Philippines, this is Aurora Memorial Hospital. The Japanese typhoons pass through this area as well. So the typhoon come from Philippines to Japan. Major typhoons will blow the houses away, but we need to prevent that. We are also trying to make sure that the patients, victims, can be treated even after the typhoons. So, disaster reduction and cooperation in Japan has been positioned in this way. When we compare bilaterally, Japan has been outstanding in terms of the share of financing. This graph is spanning from 1991 to 2010, so the data is a little old, but 64% of bilateral support is from Japan. That's $3.7 billion, summarized by World Bank. Sendai Disaster Prevention Action Framework also created the 40,000 people's human development and other finance schemes that are executed actually. We have created our global agenda as JICA. although we have a lot of challenges, we need to work with different actors. There are 20 challenges that we categorized. Number 20 is about global agenda on disaster reduction. As a business strategy, we have 3 approaches. Shogo's action framework, Sendai's action framework have been included in these 3 categories. So the first one is about investment, about infrastructure of disaster reduction. This is very important. Number 2 is about disaster reduction governance. It's about the software. Number 3 is about building back better after a disaster happens. These 3 are the approaches that are powerful in implementing. So I will skip the next slide, but I would like to talk about the first example of investment. I was stationed in Philippines, where I love, so let me talk about it. This is about the flooding countermeasures assistance. Manila has a lot of people there. The Pasig Marikina River, it can be seen here, and I have also experienced some floodings. And we created the water discharge route, Nishimanga water discharge route. And a warning system was also created through human development. We started this in the 1970s. Japan cooperated with this, and in 2020, when the Typhoon Ulysses came here, we were able to mitigate 85% of the damage that could have been caused. What we can say here is that Philippines government, for 7 years from 2011, they increased the investment on flooding countermeasures by 10 times. So ultimately, we need developing countries to be able to resilient by themselves with the budget that they need. This is one of the examples that we did that. The second approach is about the software and governance reinforcement. Let me talk about the assistance to Vietnam. This is about the meteorological radar, but not only that, we also develop people, develop staff, and we also created the infrastructure for maintenance and observation. So that's the disaster reduction governance enhancement. So let me talk about the Build Back Better project number 3. Philippines had a typhoon called Yoranda, and they started to literally use this word, Build Back Better. Japan also comprehensively supported them. A Nepali earthquake happened in 2015, and there are some schools or buildings that are collapsed. Not only did we build them again, we created the construction standards so that we can build back better. Based on Japan's experience, we helped Nepali situation. In the slide, I didn't write this, but Indonesia had an earthquake in September 2018, and a master plan for reconstruction required that Japan's experts need to be involved, and Japan's experts need to discuss with Indonesian government. And now actually Japan is involved in helping them in Indonesia. So that's all the reflection of Japan's experience. But if you look at the global disaster reduction framework, there are many things that happened and we reacted to. The biggest international framework is the Paris framework, together with SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Kawata said that no poverty is no disaster, as he said before. In addition to that, I also wanted to add that out of the 17 goals, disaster reduction is not clearly shown. It's now reflected to goal number 1, no poverty, and number 11 is about sustainable cities. Number 13, climate change actions. They already have the elements of disaster reduction. So mainstreaming of disaster reduction has already started internationally. That's how I see it. There are a lot of things that could happen in disasters, so one country cannot do everything. So partnership is very important. We are also working with United Nations and bilateral institutions and assistance. So we work and build relationships on a daily basis. For example, Hyogo Prefecture is one. It's one of the most important partners in Japan for JICA. And we have already done the following initiatives. Disaster Reduction Learning Center was established in 2007 together with Hyogo Prefecture and JICA. After the earthquake in 1995, Hyogo accumulated its experience of learning, and our know-hows of international cooperation are combined to create and develop people and training schemes. So trainings include this one, Latin American medical training. We cannot create a network one day, so we need to create the relationship on a gradual basis. Their capability needs to be better at first, but network should also be expanded. That's a very important power and capability. So let me talk about 100 years ahead. So, do we still have Earth in 100 years? Do we still see people helping each other? It's uncertain. When we got this theme for today, I felt really nervous, and I had to think about what to do today for 100 years ahead. These are the important things. The next 100 years are not going to be static. I think there will be more disasters, but what should we really do? I think on a short term, we need to make sure that 2025 is going to be a turning point for all of us. We need to change the behavior of the people because we have the Osaka Kansai's World Expo theming life. And number two, 30 years after the 1995 earthquake, TICAD 9 will also be held in Japan. This is a cornerstone or turning point for Japan. In order to activate and make the best use of 2025, we need to think about a truly sustainable society, which requires mainstreaming of disaster reduction to creating a culture of disaster reduction. In order to do that, we need to not only think about assistance, but also learning mutually. Maybe we should stop calling developed or developing countries because Japan is also helped in many ways. Human network is also very important, so we can build trust relationship with more people. And division is now serious nowadays. People to people, community to community, and government to government. Trust is very important, as well as cooperation. In order to do this, we need to work on a gradual basis to build partnership and a trust relationship. That's all from my side. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone on the rostrum explained the activities and also the goals of their activities individually. And until 4:50, we have about 40 minutes left. So I would like to borrow the wisdom from each members, each panel. So me and Mr. Hayashi have the joint researcher for the past 40 years. Up until now, this joint project continued, and with Kobayashi, after the Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake and through the Telnet activities, we have worked together in the past 30 years. And Telnet and DRI, we kept a certain distance because that they may take over our office, you know. So I didn't want the Telewatch to occupy our space for the DRI. Therefore, as the executive director of DRI, I did not show the 100% involvement or support, but I am aware of the importance of the existence of this telling live lessons. And he has served as the senior researcher for the DRI. And I think that I have a great understanding about his vision through the 30 years. And as for JICA, ever since that I was the professor at the Kyoto University, and Mr. Hayashi and I discussed a lot about the local support. So we both were the committee members of JICA, and for the first time we started the grassroots support. So up until then, the ODA was mostly about meeting the needs of recipient country. But for the first time that we thought about more about the grassroots activities such as IPO. And ever since we have participated in the committee meeting of JICA, and this kind of the grassroots activity started. And I am not the official member of JICA, but I had involved very closely. And I visited Indonesia more than 30 times. And every time I visited the JICA office in Jakarta, Indonesia faces all kinds of disasters similar to Japan, and so does Philippines. So the situation is quite similar among those three countries. And Indonesia is a poor country. And even though they have some theory, but it's not always easy to execute those visions. So this DRA forum commemorating 20th anniversary, and I explained, as I explained in the opening keynote speech, I am not 100% content with what it is now, because the DRI has the assessment committee or evaluation committee, and we have been assessed by this committee through the grade S, A, B, C. And S means that things are going quite well. And C means that it is not at all. So we have been evaluated by this committee. And based upon this evaluation, and we try to figure out what would be the improvement area, what measure we have to take. So although it's not the 100% perfect, but I think that we have made a great success. So we have that history, and what we are going to do now for another 100 years. So as I said earlier, the culture and civilizations, we have to approach from both sides. And even though what we can do as an organization is limited, but if we take time, and we'll be able to make it true. And it will take time. It cannot be able to done in a few years, but if we take 100 years, it might be possible. So I'd like to ask the panels, as DRA or DRI from now on, to connect science to resilience. They talk about the digital twin. So in order to penetrate digital twin and how to deal with their personal information, there'll be a big barrier. In Canada, it is said that digital twin failed already. So unless we are able to manipulate or to leverage the personal data, it'll be very difficult to prove the validity of the digital twin as a science. On the other hand, the telling live lessons, DRR, the pictures, puppet, and those kind of efforts are needed to pass on the lessons. So I'd like to have the honest opinions from Mr. Hayashi first. Well, talking about the private information, I don't think that would be able to leverage all the personal informations 100%. But how to visualize the personal experience without fully disclosing their personal information, I think we can still visualize or reproduce the lessons learned by the affected people. I think that could be a very good starting point, because handling of the personal information, it could be somehow connected to my number, but that's different from the digital twin. What we are going to do in a digital twin in a virtual reality, it's not totally equal. Thank you for the input. Well, the reason why I mentioned the personal information is because the digital twin, rather than developing it linearly, I think that there will be a lot of turnabout, and how we can leverage science as a weapon. I think that methodology is very important. What do you think? Well, I agree, but this country, we are not prepared for that. And ever since 1995, there was the laws and regulations in terms of the definition of science. And there was the excluding the research of the human science. So that is the concept in the past 8 years. And 2 years ago, there was the revision of the laws, and there was the science and technology innovation basic laws. And they deleted that statement, excluding the human sciences. But in the past 30 years, the science advanced in Japan. The answer is not necessarily yes. And especially it's because of the fault of the Métis, they have a very old value, and they have failed making a significant innovation. And that kind of science we have to disrupt. So ultimately, we have to go to people. So it is about the human science without connecting the private information. And we need to enrich that.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear, actually. So, Mr. Kobayashi, what's your thought? Are you talking about science? No, I mean, Mr. Hayashi talked about science, and you're about storytelling, right? Well, DRI's next 100 years will be spent on creating picture books, right? And that's consistent with the Telnet's products. So I'm really satisfied with what you're saying. But sometimes I think that in 2010 and 2020, we actually held an international forum on telling the live lessons, right? And maybe in 2030, we can do another one. I think that's a plan, but we still have 7 years to 2030. Up to 2020, I did my best, but maybe next time, I wouldn't be the one. Maybe the younger people should take the initiative. That's what I said the other day. DRI has a lot of young people, right? But seems like Mr. Kawata, you said I should still be vivid and lively. I need to continue. That's the message I got from you. So I retired from DRI last year. So I'm hoping that I can talk with younger people on a broader basis. I want to think about a new way to do that. My thinking is that it's a Jingu relocation style, I would say. Like, why is it relocated or renovated every 20 years? It's well thought, actually. If you are 20, then you'll be 40 in 20 years. And 40 years old will teach 20 years old. And 60 years old will teach 40 years old. So 3 generations have 3 opportunities to renovate Isejingu Shrine. So 3 times are very important, rather than 1. I'm close to 80, but I want people in the 40s and 50s to teach people in the 20s and 30s. Kobe Machizukuri City Building University and other institutions that I have worked with, those are the areas maybe I can work with and support. Okay. Regarding JICA, you talked about mainstreaming disaster reduction, as I heard from you, Mr. Kimura. So looking at JICA, you have the on-site, you have the sites that you have to go to and work on. From that perspective, you basically start from the sites, and that's a correct way of working on things, right? When we look back on JICA's history, I think that sometimes we cannot get to the site. It was sometimes due to diplomatic reasons that proceeded over developmental needs. So, going forward, you mentioned 3 methods for the future of JICA, right? Regarding those points, what do you think about it? Is there any conflict of interest in JICA? That's a difficult question, but there's always a conflict of interest, right? Quantitatively speaking, there is an issue of financing, of course. Do we have the money to do this? And there are a lot of unexpected disasters in the world. And when that happens, we need to invest in those areas. We're focusing on Ukraine reconstruction. We have a lot of human resource going there. And of course, disaster reduction is a priority. There is no conflict there because it's about people's lives. It's going to remain as a central piece for our initiatives. If I can jump from the discussion of conflict, I want to mention about the disaster reduction picture book. I think inclusiveness and diversity is very important. Hardware infrastructure like river reconstruction is what we have already done, but people-to-people relationship is very important. Some people are dispatched to schools as teachers. When we bring those picture books to those schools, it's about human touch with other people there. We can also educate and enlighten the people there. So as a possibility going forward, we can also think about further possibility of expanding our businesses. Thank you so much. Regarding that picture book I mentioned, when I thought about it, actually, I thought that I needed the JICA's help. Why? Because we're working with people, right? Then, even though we have information society in Japan, we still need to work with people face to face. Otherwise, things don't get progressed. I don't know in what way the picture books are going to be created. We don't have any concrete plans yet. But at the initial phase, I realized that we need your support from JICA. So JICA must have struggled a lot in on-site countries. And what can we do for JICA? Is there any support that we can give to JICA? I'm thinking that way, and that's the possibility I'm talking about. So in 100 years, there is no guarantee for success. even in several years, there are uncertainties against the success. But that's what an organization is. I think we need to put forward what our goal is. Otherwise, we'll be broken from inside, right? So you're here at this forum today. I'm really glad that you joined, and DRA needs to be able to contribute internationally in the future, and that's the awareness we need to have, all right? So Mr. Ozumaya-san, do you understand Japanese, by the way? A little bit? Maybe a lot? Yes, I understand Japanese. So in Turkey, Bosai Koshien was mentioned, right, in your presentation. And together with Hyogo Prefecture, you have worked on Bosai Koshien. I understand that point very much. In details, you talked about the activities that you have done, and you are here today, right? And looking at the earthquake in 1995, and that triggered the creation of HAT Kobe. There are 20 or so institutions that are working for disaster reduction. And going forward, what should we do? That's what we're discussing now. And then I want to hear from you about your impression, because you're working on these activities in Turkey, right? You heard about us or the initiatives that we are doing in Japan. What's your opinion about that? Yes, thank you so much. Well, to be honest, we have had a lot of earthquakes in Turkey, but Hanshin Awashi earthquake, and 4 years later, we had an earthquake. And we said we need to change the way of thinking. We're never going to get back to the past. We need to be more resilient as a nation, we said. And since then, I mean, if I can talk about JICA here, we have started a lot of disaster reduction projects. For example, Istanbul will have a similar earthquake to that of Tokyo. Istanbul investigation is going on in order to prepare for such disasters. We're doing the retrofitting to create a hazard-related maps. We need to do some more investigation on that, but what have we learned from you? Well, JICA's trainees came to Hyogo from Turkey. I think it's great because in 1995 there was an earthquake and Hyogo Prefecture was central in the reconstruction, and their information and experience were not only used by yourselves, but also with other countries, and including Turkey. We got your information. So the first project we worked upon, and the managers at that time also came to Hyogo. And a disaster reduction officer was established, and we should also create the same in Turkey, I said. What's different is that after the earthquake, you created the officers, but in Turkey, there will be a huge earthquake. We knew that, and we should create a disaster reduction building before the earthquake happens. It's close to DRA, actually, but from Kyoto disaster reduction or Ariake, their elements are partially taken to us. I mean, from Hyogo, your experience is so precious to us. I heard about Telnet for the first time today. Sorry, I should have known you, but I should have known about that beforehand. These initiatives on disaster reduction, or DLL, have been taking place, right? So what we're trying to do as a foundation is that we have Mr. Hayashi here, and he has the outcome of data, which we can utilize, and we share with other stakeholders, including students, professors, so that we can create the next generation of disaster preparedness. We need them to understand that because it doesn't lead to resilient society otherwise. We talked about resilience to think about disaster risk reduction, but Hyogo is our watch list. We are watching really closely, Hyogo. So your experience and lessons learned are very important for us. And experience sharing are very important for us. So through JICA or through our foundation or through our friendship foundation or fund, we can accumulate information so we can transfer information to Turkey. We're like a bridge between the two.
And also, in one country cannot realize resilience. So we have to learn from each other. So that's the reason why we started the Bosai Koshin. And there could be there are also many other projects I haven't talked about today. And what is interesting is that it's not always top-down communication for the students. We get the feedback from the students, and sometimes it's quite creative. So even small children, about the digital gaming, because they are very acquainted with those digital tools. So they could make a lot of proposals from the bottom up. So this is how we can change. We can make changes, and we can nurture one another to realize the resilient country. And I have a lot of expectation to Kobe as the information source, but hopefully from Turkey and from Indonesia will be able to provide new ideas, something creative. So as the Mr. Kimura said that if you want to fast, go by yourself. And it resonated with me quite a lot. Thank you. Well, I myself think that for us as Japanese, Turkey and Taiwan, I feel a great affinity. And I feel very close to those two countries. And I think that a lot of Japanese feel that way. So when earthquake hit Turkey, it is not something like something happened in one of the country in Europe. I thought that it is something very terrible happening, and we have to do something about it. So I think it's the matter of the culture, and considering that mentality, when you do or continue your activity of the DRR, of course, that you can rely on Japan, but we ourselves have tried so many things, all the trials and errors after the 1995 great earthquake. And without the process or without the history, it is difficult to figure out the optimum way for your own country. So we have to focus to a certain extent. And as a reference, of course, there are things that you can learn from Japan. But please know that we had no idea exactly what to do right after the great Hanshin-Awaji earthquake in 1995. But we took the process and made a progress. So this is how I feel after all those 20 years. So as I said, the focus is necessary. Otherwise, you cannot deep dive and connect more deeply because there is a limitation of resources, both the manpower and the budget. So if we try to do too broad, and it might not be possible. So for the DRI, the budget remains the same. That means that the government says that the rest of the budget allocation has decreased in order to maintain the same budget for the DRI. And the Japanese government said that this is because we acknowledge the outcome or achievement of our organization. That's why in the past 20 years, our budget allocated for DRA hasn't changed. But it is for sure that there is some limitation of the resources. So what is really important for the country, it is not easy decision, but you have to make a point severely if we want to continue the activities. But immediately after the disaster, there are so many things that we wanted to do, but there are some pros and cons or weaknesses and strengths. So we have to identify them. So through all various activities, and divergence is most important. So we have to diverge the things that is most important. So the continuity is the condition. Otherwise, there is a possibility of making mistake or failure. Therefore, I hope that close relationship will be maintained between Turkey and Hyogo Prefecture in terms of the DRR. So I appreciate your continued support. Thank you. By the way, well, I am not trying to import everything from Hyogo in terms of the DRR activities. Of course, I am aware that it's important to make it suitable for our country. That's why the idea itself is originating from here, but we try to be creative to fit our country. But I really appreciate that we get a lot of ideas from the Kobe as the origin. And also I appreciate the support by JICA and Hyogo Prefecture. What is important is to develop the resilient society, the resilient country for the next generation. Okay, thank you. Using the remaining time, I would like to discuss about the DRA activities. I mentioned earlier about the project evaluation committee, and the committee members is the one rank higher than I am. That means that everyone is over 80 years old. So now that we are commemorating 20 years, and I asked them to resign because those members had been engaged in the research for DRR since the 1995. And it makes sense. However, from now on, they cannot evaluate their activity because their academic knowledge or experiences is not updated. So when they make the evaluation, they based upon the conventional criteria. But from now on, they have to change the criteria for evaluation with a new perspective. And to do that, we have to ask the people who are being active on the front line, not the conventional folks. Therefore, I asked the Mr. Hayashi to be the chairperson of the evaluation committee. So it is the changeover. It will be the replacement of all the members. And today, we didn't invite him as the chairman of the evaluation committee, as a representative of the NIED. But from your perspective, may I ask you to become that chairperson?
It's hard to comment, but of course, the members were reshuffled, right? The evaluation committee members are now younger than you, and I am the oldest among the members, so that's why I am the head. I may die soon, I'm just joking, but maybe some younger people may be able to do the evaluation committee head. Anyway, after I started this job, I think Secretariat has made too much effort. They did a lot of researching and they did a lot of briefing. And it's really difficult to oppose to the tremendous amount of effort that they have made. I can be more critic when we talk about specific individuals, but I am the head of the assessment committee. So I wanted to hear from what everybody thinks. And basically, we had the majority vote to assess your institution. Maybe you're trying to make me not critical by having a majority vote. No, I'm just joking. But Mr. Kobayashi, we had a total reshuffle of committee members. What do you think? Well, I think maybe it was kind of too late, but I'm just joking. But it happened, right? They should have retired at the age of 70. So I was thinking when one of the members is going to retire. I'm just joking, but local government or governors and their municipality head may also resign after 10 years, because if they work for 10 years, they create too much legacy. Rather than old people, rather than being old, it's also more problematic to work too long. Are you going to be 80 after 10 years, Mr. Hayashi? I don't know, but young people's evaluation and our evaluation could have a gap, and it should be interesting. It should be an interesting insight, right? A, B, C, or S evaluation is one, but not only that, we want to hear from young people. What do they think about? And we should incorporate that into the evaluation method. That's what I thought. And I'm also one of the elderlies, and I shouldn't really complain too much about it, but okay, what do you think, JICA? You have been doing the project assessment, right? Is there any gap between you and the on-site? Thank you so much. We also receive evaluation because we are an independent government agency now. I also feel that you can never be 100% objective. And what you assert as outcome is less convincing. We need to get the voices from the stakeholders, and we need to look at the impact that we have made in the on-site. So at DRI, you are doing a lot of enlightenment and educational activities, right? And it takes a lot of time. So chronologically, we also have hard time creating timelines. It's not going to be like what you work on now will have an impact next year. It needs to be 10 years or 20 years perspective. Sometimes we need to have an impact assessment, right? We also hear from people before presenting our assessment results. Okay, Mr. Osadamar, in your foundation, what do you think? When you assess your project, is there any assessment going on? Thank you so much. Our foundation members have discussed how the projects are going. So always we have been evaluated. You have committees, right? And within our foundation, we do have a committee, but we don't have any project evaluation committee. We have university professors or disaster reduction experts from whom we hear their opinions, so we can understand if we are really effective in helping Turkey and Japan, and we improve whatever was not working. So in order to make it stable and continuous, we need to change the programs of evaluation, I think. It's very important. We have something that's close to the Japan's cabinet office in Turkey. They also give us proposals for improvement. So in JICA, you work on a project and you have the post-evaluation, right? But we have not done that yet. We have not been there yet. But I know how to do it, so we should be able to improve more. Thank you so much. I think it's been 20 years, right? And during the 20 years, I experienced a lot, really. Each one of such experiences will have to be evaluated and assessed. Only after that can we be sure that we have done a good job. So there is no guarantee that it'll be a success from the beginning. But when I look back on what we have done, I think the result was good. That's how I understand our activities. So for our future activities as well, we need to evaluate our businesses and projects from that viewpoint. And we need to include external eyes as well. We'll be all dead in 100 years, right? But hopefully we can expect a good success from our projects. So DRA is really unique globally as well. We need to make the best use of this asset that we have and create the legacy for future generations. That's what we want to do. So dear audience here or people joining online, my message is that Hyogo Prefecture started this disaster reduction activities, and we need your support going forward as well. Okay, I know that we are running out of time, so that's it for the panel discussion. Thank you so much. Mr. Kawata and all the panelists, thank you very much. So the panelists can now leave the stage. Thank you very much. So lastly but not least, Mr. Kawata Yoshiaki from DRI will give a summary and closing address.
So through the panel discussion, we talk about the DRA and DRI's future. And what kind of activities we are going to pursue. I hope that you got some idea. In the past 20 years, there are a lot of uncertainty. And as the executive director, I always had that question in my mind. But at the beginning, we set the 6th target. And in order to achieve those 6 targets, we made a lot of effort. And through those 20 years of experiences, and we started to figure out that what we have to focus. We don't have the 100% confidence yet, but I think that we started to have some vision about what to focus as the DRI and DRA. And this is because that all the people involved in those 2 organizations made a lot of commitment and exchanged opinions. And that endeavors accumulated. And now we are at the turning point that we have to summarize it and make it possible. So the new year started. Whether the things goes well or go wrong, and how to stabilize activities and progress as an organization, where it would require some technique, which I think is very important. And I try to summarize it. So it is the once every year DRA forum, and I think it's a very good opportunity to collect the wisdoms from all the people. And I'm looking for the one solution or one answer. But we would like to reflect all the feedback or input from all the members for the future activities, because when there is the great earthquake hit in Kobe, and we have received a lot of support from so many people, and lessons learned at that time, and know-how and all the wisdoms, we have to leverage them in an effective way by linking to the future DRR activities for this country and also around the world. As I said, there are not many things that we can do alone, but we would like to pass on to the younger generation. And for that, we would like to make investment. So commemorating 20th anniversary of DRA. And maybe some people expect that we set some different or drastic direction. But at this moment, when we think about what will be successful, and I think that it is time to evaluate the past achievement and think about the next step so that we wouldn't go to the wrong direction. So that we'll be able to continue our effort and giving a big impact for the disaster risk reduction. So thank you very much for your attentions, your participations. And there is still a lot of uncertainty and some concern about the COVID-19. But the people say that we are already in the after COVID, after pandemic phase already. And we have to break through for the future. And for that, we really need to always think about the relation with the society. So thank you again. Thank you. This concludes the International Disaster Reduction Alliance Forum 2023 in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of DRA. Thank you very much for your attendance for long hours.